The chamber was not meant for beings like him. The air tasted thin and carried a faint, sweet chemical scent that his translator flagged as harmless bioaerosol. Mood-stabilizing variety. Kim Jun stood perfectly still on the circular platform, the sole source of solid, unadorned matter in a space designed to disorient. The Galactic Council High Tribunal surrounded him in a vast, terrifying ring. The floor beneath his shoes was clear, showing dizzying depths of the city below. The walls, if they could be called that, shifted between translucent and shimmering displays of alien data. Above, a false sky swirled with the colors of the Council species' homeworlds. He was a rock in a stream of light and energy. He wore a simple, dark gray suit of Earth manufacture. In his hand, he held a data sliver, a physical token of human intent. It felt heavy. The silence was a living thing, pressing against his eardrums. They were making him wait. This, he knew, was the first part of the test. A test of patience, of composure, of biological resilience to psychological pressure. June focused on his breathing. In, out, slow. He thought of his wife, Hana, in her small garden in Seoul, of the stubborn cherry tree that bloomed every spring against the city smog. He thought of Dr. Lee Yuna, his brightest student, who had argued with him for hours about this very moment. "They will see humility as weakness," she had said, her eyes fierce. "We must be strong." He had disagreed. True strength, he had told her, is in the offering, not the demand. Finally, light coalesced into form directly before him. High Judge Vral of the Silurian Dominion materialized, his amphibian bulk resting on a hovering disk. His skin was a mottled blue-green, his large, lidless black eyes reflecting June's tiny figure 100 times over. To June's left, the Korvax Primus appeared not a body, but an intricate, slowly rotating crystal cluster from which a voice emanated, calm and devoid of inflection. "Begin the accession review for the species-designated Homo sapiens." From the marginal system Sol 3, Vral intoned, his voice a wet gurgle that the translator in June's ear made cold and formal. A holoscreen ignited in the air, listing humanity's crimes. Primitive faster-than-light drive based on brute force gravity manipulation. A history of planetary conflict, listed down to the names of wars June had studied as ancient history. Biological inconsistency. Technological development described as haphazard and littered with recursive error. "It is the opinion of the Council," stated the Korvax premise, "that your species presents a chaotic variable. Your emotional spectrum is volatile. Your social structures are unstable. You lack the harmony required for galactic citizenship." June waited for the list to finish. He had expected this. The Galactic Council valued perfection, order, and a clean, linear progression. Humanity was a scribbled note in the margin of their perfect book. When the light of the list faded, June took a single deliberate step forward. The action was so small, yet in the static chamber it echoed. He raised the data sliver. "High Tribunal," he said, his voice calm, amplified by hidden systems to fill the space. "Humanity understands its place in the galactic timeline. We are young. We do not come before you boasting of our weapons or our territorial claims. We come with an offering." A ripple of something amusement. Annoyance passed through the assembled observers, their forms flickering in their seats around the ring. Vral's throat sac inflated slightly. "An offering? You have nothing we need. Your minerals are common. Your biological matter is simplistic. Our offering," June continued, ignoring the insult, "is not material. It is a method, a way of thought." He slotted the data sliver into the platform's port. Above him, simple, clear images formed. A time-lapse of a virus being dismantled, not by a targeted drug, but by a reprogrammed carrier protein. A diagram of a failing star miner's reactor, showing how a controlled imbalance, not stability, restored its function. 1,000 tiny solutions to 1,000 different problems, each one elegant, unexpected, and counter to established logic. We call it adaptive logic, June said. It is our species' learned skill. It is the process of finding paths where none are seen, of using limitations as foundations. We do not merely solve problems. We redefine them. And we wish to share this with you, to aid the galactic community. As a gift, the silence returned, thicker now. The Corvax Primus's crystals pulsed with a faint, rapid light. Vrall stared, his large eyes unblinking. Then the Silurian judge laughed. It was a horrible, bubbling sound. A gift? You presume to gift the Galactic Council with your chaotic thinking? Your solutions are accidents, flukes of a disordered mind. It is not a presumption, June said, his heart beginning a slow, heavy beat in his chest. It is an observation. Your records, which we have studied with respect, show recurring stagnation around Class 12 intractable problems. In medical fields, in quantum field stability, in socio-engineering. Our methods provide a new vector. You accuse us of deficiency? The Corvax's voice held a new, sharp frequency. I state an observable fact, June replied, holding his ground. And offer a tool. Vrall rose from his disk, his form imposing. You come here from your dirty little world, and you speak of observing us? You speak of giving us tools? This is not offering. This is arrogance. This is cultural contamination of the highest order. You believe your random emotional scribbling is superior to millennia of perfected galactic science? June saw the trap now. It was not about logic. It was about power, about hierarchy. To offer a solution was to imply a problem existed. To imply they had a problem was to challenge their perfection. And challenge was met with eradication. The offer stands, June said quietly, knowing it was futile. It does not, Vrall hissed. The species Homo sapiens is hereby classified as a malignant irrational. Your application for membership is denied. Furthermore, to cleanse the taint of this presumption and to serve as a lesson to any other upstart culture, the vector of contamination must be sterilized. June's translator beeped once, a soft, sad tone, and went dead. The universal feed was cut. He was alone in a room of aliens, their intentions now clear without need of translation. The Corvax Primus spoke, its light dim. The entity known as Kim June, human envoy, is sentenced to public termination. The method, molecular dispersal. Let it be witnessed. Guards, sleek and metallic, glided onto the platform. June did not struggle. He looked at Vrall, then at the cold light of the Corvax. He thought of Hannah's garden, of Yuna's fierce intelligence, of the messy, beautiful, struggling world he came from. As the guards took his arms. His right hand, hidden by his body, found a small, hard panel on the side of his suit's belt. It was not a weapon. It was a button. A single solid press, a pre-agreed signal. A single diplomatic code pulse, routed through the dead translator's emergency power. It contained one word, one identifier. KAIROS. The guards forced him to his knees. A humming sphere of light descended from above. There was no heat, only a profound sense of unraveling. Kim June, diplomat of Earth, looked at his executioners without fear, his final thought a simple, quiet hope that his people would understand the message. Then, from his feet upward, he dissolved into a shower of silent, glittering light, until nothing of him remained in the gleaming, perfect chamber. The pulse from the dead channel was not loud. It was a single, flat tone that sounded in the secure monitoring hub of United Earth Command. To the young technician on duty, A man named Park Jin. It was just another piece of background noise at first. Then his screen flashed with a specific, dreadful glyph. A stylized hourglass inside a circle, all in red. His blood went cold. He had trained for this alert, but never believed he would see it. He hit the master alarm. A sound unlike any other echoed through the bunker deep under the Alps, a low, resonant chime that spoke of endings, not warnings. It was the sound chosen for this moment, because it could not be mistaken for anything else. In her quarters, Dr. Lee Yuna was reviewing the last public feed from the council chamber, trying to find some hope in June's calm posture. The chime tore through her thoughts. She dropped her tablet. It clattered on the floor, the image of her mentor frozen mid-sentence. She knew. She knew before she ran out the door, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. General Park Min-soo was in a strategy meeting, pointing at a holographic map of Sol system defenses. The chime made his hand freeze in mid-air. Every officer in the room went still. Their faces, lit by the blue glow of the map, turned to him. He was a man built for slow, grinding wars of attrition, for defense. His jaw tightened. "All of you, with me," he said, his voice gravel. Now, they converged in the main situation room. The room was a bowl of tense quiet, lit by soft ambient light. At the center was a round table of dark wood, a strange touch of earth in the high-tech space. President Choi Subin was already there, her hands flat on the table surface. She was a calm woman, known for her steady leadership during famines and energy crises. Her face was pale now, her eyes fixed on the empty air where the main hologram would appear. The last to arrive was the head of the diplomatic corps, an older man named Kwon. He looked shattered. "The main feed was severed 11 minutes ago," he reported, his voice cracking. The final public signal showed Envoy Kim being approached by tribunal guards. "The Silurians have just issued a statement. They claim he was terminated for cultural crimes against galactic order." A raw, pained sound escaped Yuna before she could stop it. She pressed a hand to her mouth. General Park's knuckles were white, where he gripped the back of a chair. President Choi did not move. "Show us the final diplomatic code," she said. Her voice was too steady. Technician Park Jin's face appeared on a side screen. "Madam President, we received a single pulse burst on Envoy Kim's private line, timed just before the feed died. It is code word verified." "It is." "It's Kairos." The word hung in the air. It was the word they had all prayed would never be used. It was not a call for help. It was a declaration. It meant the diplomatic path was irrevocably broken. It meant the envoy was dead, and by the hand of the council itself. It activated a set of protocols that existed in a sealed digital vault, untouched since their creation. "Confirm it," General Park growled. "Biometric and crypto key confirmation is absolute, sir," the technician said. It was him. The president closed her eyes for a long second. When she opened them, the grief was still there, but it was buried under a layer of granite. "Then we are at the decision point. General Park, Dr. Lee, report on Protocol Endgame. Full disclosure to this council." Yuna took a shaky breath, forcing her scientist's mind to work. She stepped forward. A hologram sprang to life above the table. It did not show warships or weapons. It showed a schematic of Earth itself, wrapped in a delicate, shimmering web of light. 3 generations ago, Yuna began, her voice gaining strength, our leaders realized we could never win an arms race against the galaxy. Our technology was a child's scribble next to their masterworks. If they ever turned hostile, sheer force would doom us. She zoomed in on the web. So we invested in the only thing that was uniquely, powerfully human. Not our strength, but our mind. Our ability to look at a locked door and not look for a key, but to realize the wall next to it is paper thin. The cognition engine, President Choi stated. Yes, Yuna said. It is not an artificial intelligence. It is an amplifier. It links every major research hub, every quantum computer, every data farm and university, and even personal think tanks on the planetary net. It takes a problem, breaks it into pieces, and distributes the pieces to human minds best suited to tackle them, and synthesizes the results. It is the ultimate expression of adaptive logic, our gift that they rejected. General Park took over, his voice like stone grinding on stone. Endgame Protocol is not a military plan. It is a single strategic question posed to the engine. We spent decades feeding it every scrap of data we had on the Galactic Council, their technology, their biology, their sociology, their economics. Everything June and others secretly gathered. The protocol primes the engine with one question, the worst question we can ask it. He looked at each person in the room. The question is this: how does a primitive, single-planet species force an unconditional surrender from a galactic-scale civilization, when that civilization does not follow the rules of war or diplomacy? A chilling silence followed. It was a monstrous question. It was the question of a cornered animal that had decided to become something else entirely. And the engine has an answer? President Choi asked. It has 1,000,000 answers, Yuna said quietly. It has been running silent simulations for years, waiting for this. It does not propose invasion. It proposes a Niji configuration, a peaceful, devastating reconfiguration of reality as they understand it. The room was still. The weight of what they were about to do pressed down on them. They were not launching missiles. They were about to launch an idea. A virus of thought. President Choi stood up. Kim Jun went to them with an open hand. They cut it off. They have shown us their law is brutality. Our response will not be brutality. It will be a lesson. She turned to General Park. Activate the Endgame Protocol. Authorize the cognition engine for full, unrestricted strategic deployment. Target the foundational stability of the Galactic Council. She turned to Yuna. Doctor, you will lead the cognitive offensive. You will be the voice of Earth, the voice June no longer has. She finally looked at the ghostly image of the Earth, wrapped in its thinking web. They wanted to make an example of us. So we will show them what humanity truly is when it has nothing left to lose but its patience. Make the call. In the heart of the bunker, a sequence was initiated. Across Earth, in silent server farms under mountains, in orbiting data stations, in quiet university basements, lights began to pulse in a new synchronized rhythm. The planet, for the first time, was thinking with one vast, directed, and terribly focused mind. The question had been asked. It was now beginning to speak its answer. Outside, the sun shone on a world that looked peaceful, unaware that it had just become the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. The Galactic Council waited for the war. On Siluria, the great orbital defense platforms hummed with power, their weapon nodes tracking empty space. On Korvax Prime, logic fleets calculated the probable vectors of a human attack, running trillions of simulations. They expected rage. They expected a pathetic fleet of primitive ships, burning from their marginal system in a suicidal emotional charge. It would be a useful final lesson, a cleansing fire. The first sign was not a weapon. It was a gift. On Siluria, the planetary climate was a masterpiece of bioengineering. Vast, living networks in the atmosphere regulated temperature, filtered solar radiation, and nurtured the global spore fields that were the foundation of Silurian life. For generations, a minor, dormant flaw had existed in the Western Hemisphere's network, a subtle genetic drift in the atmospheric processors that caused a faint, recurring toxin to build up every few years. It was a trivial thing, corrected with routine, expensive purges. The Silurian science guilds considered it an unsolvable intrinsic fault, a small tax on perfection. One standard cycle after the human envoy's execution, the fault vanished. Not through a purge, but through repair. The genetic drift reversed itself. The atmospheric processors in the Western Hemisphere began operating at 100.2% efficiency, their output cleaner than the untouched Eastern networks. The change was so elegant, so minimal, it was invisible to Silurian scanners for hours. It was discovered only because a low-level technician noticed the purge. Systems had nothing to do. Panicked reports flew up the chain of command. The High Science Guild tore the code apart. They found no invasive virus, no hacking signature. They found only a beautifully simple sequence of data, a correction that used the existing biological machinery in a way they had never considered. It had been delivered as a standard system update packet, flagged with the highest Silurian security clearance, a clearance that should not have existed. Attached was a text file in plain galactic standard. It read, "A structural optimization, a gift from humanity. In memory of diplomat Kim June." High Judge Vral, when informed, was furious. They dare to touch our works? They dare to improve them? It is a contaminant. Scrub it, reverse it. The Science Guild could not. The fix was woven into the system's core now. To remove it would cause catastrophic failure. They were forced to accept it. The news leaked. On Siluria, the populace was confused. The air was better. Was that bad? On Korvax Prime, the event was different. The Korvax did not have biology. They had sublime crystalline logic. Their Dyson sphere fragment, a collector of stellar energy for their computational matrices, operated at 99.9987% efficiency. It was the pinnacle of their engineering, a figure they were deeply proud of. The efficiency rose to 99.9998%. A minuscule leap in numbers, a monumental leap in concept. It was achieved not by adding more collectors, but by retiming the existing energy. Absorption pulses in a rhythmic pattern that accounted for stellar flares the Korvax had considered background noise. The new protocol arrived as a peer-reviewed mathematical theorem, submitted to the Korvax's own central archive under the name of a long-dead Korvax theorist. Only a footnote, hidden in the metadata, gave its true origin, solution derived via human adaptive logic paradigms. For June, the Korvax High Logic Council was thrown into disarray. The math was perfect. It was more than perfect. It was beautiful. It was a style of thinking, clean and radical, that they had to admire even as it horrified them. They could not reject it without rejecting logic itself. Their whole society was built on logic. They implemented the protocol. The quiet shame of it hummed through their networks. Then the third event happened. In the Lyran sector, a client species called the Tova were dying. A neural phage, a weapon left over from an ancient conflict, had escaped its containment. It was considered incurable. The Council had offered palliative care and relocation for the elite. The Tova were destined to be a footnote, a tragic but manageable loss. The phage disappeared. Not contained, but dismantled. A broadcast from Earth, on open channels, provided the complete genetic and nanite-based countermeasure. It was not a cure. It was an unmaking. The phage was persuaded to disassemble itself into harmless proteins. The instructions were so simple, a Tova child could understand them. The accompanying message was broadcast galaxy-wide. Life is not disposable. A gift from humanity. Remember Kim June. This was the turning point. The first two events had shocked the rulers. The third event galvanized the ruled. Across 100 client worlds, in mining outposts and trade stations, the story spread. The humans were not attacking. They were helping. and they were helping those the Council had abandoned. The act was a direct, silent rebuke to the Council's core philosophy of selective perfection. On Earth, in the bunker, Dr. Lee Yuna watched the galactic networks light up with confusion, panic, and a dawning, terrible hope. The cognition engine worked day and night. It was not a single mind, but a chorus. A farmer in Kenya saw a pattern in soil erosion data that inspired a new approach to stabilizing a failing orbital habitat. A teenager in Jakarta, playing a fluid dynamics puzzle game, solved a riddle that became key to optimizing a starfighter's engine wash. The engine collected these pieces, these flashes of human insight, and assembled them into impossible solutions. General Park stared at the strategic map, which now showed not military movements, but waves of information. "They don't know how to fight this," he said, his voice a mix of awe and grim satisfaction. "They prepared for missiles. We are sending them miracles." On Siluria, Viol called an emergency session. "They are hacking reality itself. It is an act of war." A minor species representative, a bird-like creature named Kathra, dared to speak. "Is it? They have cured the Tova plague. My own species has analyzed the human correction to your atmosphere, High Judge. It is flawless. Where is the attack? We see only philanthropy. It is a trick." Vral roared. A softening before the strike. The Korvax delegate's light pulsed. "Our analysis suggests otherwise. There is no military follow-up. There is only the continued application of a problem-solving methodology they call adaptive logic. Our simulations indicate a 99.96% probability that this is their retaliation. They are proving the value of what we destroyed. They are demonstrating our deficiency." The word hung in the council chamber. Deficiency. It was a word they used for client species for broken things. The human strategy was now horrifyingly clear. They were not trying to beat the Galactic Council. They were trying to make it irrelevant. They were solving problems the Council could not, or would not, solve. And with every solution, they chipped away at the Council's authority, its reason for being. Panic, cold and quiet, began to replace anger in the hearts of the rulers. How do you wage war on an enemy that sends you thank you notes with your own medicine attached? How do you defend against an attack that makes your own civilization work better, while whispering the name of the man you murdered? The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the human fleet that would never come. The real attack was already everywhere. It was in the cleaner air of Siluria, in the more efficient energy grid of the Korvax, in the grateful tears of the Tova. It was an idea, and it was spreading faster than any warship ever could. Earth had called checkmate, and the Council was just beginning to realize they were trapped on the board. The chamber of the High Tribunal was no longer a place of quiet power. It crackled with a brittle, fearful energy. The shifting lights on the walls seemed to flicker like a failing heart. The members of the Galactic Council were no longer a unified ring of judgment. They were a fragmented collection of species, divided by the simple, devastating gifts from Earth. High Judge Vral, his skin dull and blotchy with stress, slammed a webbed hand on his podium. "Enough! This passive aggression is a poison. We must vote. Immediate, total orbital bombardment of Sol 3. Scrub the planet clean. It is the only way to cauterize this infection." A low murmur rippled through the assembly. The Tova representative, a small being whose fur was only now beginning to regrow after the phage, stood on shaky legs. "You would murder the ones who saved my people? You would call that justice? You call them the infection?" Their voice was thin but carried across the silent room. "I see no aggression. I see only the help you never gave us." Vral's large eyes bulged. "They are manipulating you. Can you not see? This is a psychological warfare of the most insidious kind. It is effective, stated the Korvax Primus, its crystal form glowing with a troubled, rhythmic light. Our analysis continues. The human methodology is not random. It is a targeted demonstration of capability. Each gift is also a lesson. They show us a problem we tolerated or ignored, and then they solve it with an elegance that shone us our own science. They are not attacking our ships, High Judge. They are attacking our credibility. From another sector, a new voice joined. It belonged to Ambassador Tellin of the Yulari, a species known for their complex silicate-based communication. They had been quiet observers for centuries. The Korvax is correct. The humans have changed the game. They have made our strength our weapons, our fleets irrelevant. They fight with cognition. And they are winning the only battle that matters, the battle for legitimacy. My people have received inquiries from 3 pre-space flight cultures. They asked not for Council protection, but for how to contact Earth for problem-solving assistance. Viral felt a cold dread seeping through him. This was worse than rebellion. This was obsolescence. Then we strike now, before this rot spreads further, and prove their point entirely. Telen countered, their voice chiming softly, that we are violent, reactionary, and incapable of handling a challenge to our authority, except with annihilation. You would make Kim Jun's ghost the most powerful diplomat in the galaxy. The chamber erupted into arguments. Blocks formed. The old powers, the Silurians and their closest allies, demanded fire and retribution. A larger, looser coalition of minor species, many of whom had benefited from the human solutions or saw hope in them, argued for caution, for dialogue, for anything but more violence. The Korvax faction was split, paralyzed by the logical impossibility of the situation. The most rational response to the human strategy was unclear. In the heart of the chaos. Ambassador Tellin made a decision. They sent a tight beam, heavily encrypted data pulse. It was not to a fellow council member. It was a blind signal, directed towards the Sol system, using a routing protocol they had observed in the human gift packages. It contained a simple message: the council fractures. Some listen. How do we stop the slide to war? There are those who would hear the voice of June's people. On Earth, the cognition engine flagged the signal. It was not hostile. It was a thread of possibility. Dr. Lee Yuna was summoned to the Situation Room. They are arguing amongst themselves, General Park said, pointing to the translated intercepts. Vral wants to burn us. Others are pushing back. This Telen is reaching out. President Choi looked at Yuna. This is the moment June prepared for. The moment a crack appears. You must speak into it. Yuna felt the weight of it. She was not a diplomat by training. She was a scientist, a xenoanalyst. But she had been June's student. She understood the message they had to send. I will need a direct link. I will need to say the right thing. You will, Choi said. The engine will help you with the data, with the logic. You must provide the heart. The human heart. Minutes later, in a secure transmission chamber, Yuna faced a blank screen. The link was established, one-way and untraceable, to a private node Talen provided. She knew she was not addressing the whole council. She was addressing the fracture. Her image appeared in the private view screens of Talen, the dissenting Korvax, the Tova, the Yulari, and a dozen others. She looked young, tired, and utterly determined. To those who will listen, she began, her voice clear. I am Dr. Lee Yuna of Earth. I was a student of Kim Jun. You showed him no mercy. You gave him no trial. You dissolved him for offering you help. She paused, letting the stark truth hang in the digital space. In response, you expected war. You are experts in war. You know its language, its costs, its conclusions. So we did not speak it. We spoke in the only language that is truly, uniquely human. We solved the problem. On their screens, data streams appeared, showing the before and after of the Silurian atmosphere. The Korvax energy logs, the Tova phage count falling to 0. The problem was not you. The problem was the belief that your power gave you the right to declare what is valid and what is not. To declare a living being disposable. So we solved that problem. We demonstrated that no species, no matter how powerful, holds a monopoly on solutions. We demonstrated that the mind you executed was part of a mind that can fix your air, power your cities, and cure your plagues. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze piercing through the light years. You executed our diplomat for offering you solutions. So we broadcast them. You sought to make us an example. You have? An example of what happens when wisdom is met with violence. You are now fighting the one enemy you cannot defeat. A better idea. She transmitted a final data package. It was not another solution. It was a key. It was the core code, the foundational philosophy of the cognition engine's adaptive logic protocols. Open source, unrestricted. This is the weapon you fear, Una said. We give it to you, not to use against you, for you to use for yourselves. The gift Kim Jong tried to give you is now yours. The choice was always yours. You chose death. We chose understanding. Now the galaxy can choose. The transmission ended. In the council chamber, the silence was absolute. Talen looked at the data key glowing on their screen. The Korvax dissidents were already analyzing the human logic core, their crystals blazing with frantic, wondrous light. The Tova representative wept quietly. Vral, sensing the shift, screamed for order. A trick. It is another trick. But it was too late. The idea was out. The human had not demanded surrender. She had given away their secret. She had shown them the door was never locked. Only their minds were. And she had made it clear that the council, as it stood, was the problem they themselves now had to solve. The first riots began on Siluria, not an hour later. Not for food or freedom, but for access to the human cognitive protocols. The first official vote of no confidence in the Silurian leadership was lodged by the Yulari bloc. The fracture was now a chasm, and across it, the ghost of Kim Jong and the voice of Liuna echoed, not with threats, but with a simple, devastating offer of a better way. The war was over. The revolution had just begun. The room was simple. It was the most shocking thing about it. After the soaring, mind-bending architecture of the Galactic Council chambers, this place on the neutral Omni station was almost plain. Gray composite walls, a solid floor that did not show terrifying depths, a single oval table of polished dark wood. It felt heavy, real. It felt like Earth. Dr. Lee Una sat on one side, her back straight. She wore a simple black suit. Beside her, General Park Min-soo was a statue in uniform, his eyes missing nothing. Across from them was not a monolithic block of enemies, but a small mixed group. Ambassador Telen of the Yulari, their silicate skin catching the soft light. A Korvax delegate, a smaller, simpler crystal cluster than the Primus, pulsing with a blue light. The Tova representative, still looking frail but with clear eyes. A few others from species who had broken with the old order. The Silurians were not present. Their regime had collapsed in the face of internal revolt and galactic shunning. There was no grand judge's podium, no hovering discs of authority, just chairs around a table. The silence was not one of threat, but of profound exhaustion and wary hope. Una placed a small, flat device on the table. She activated it. A life-sized hologram of Kim Jong appeared, standing peacefully beside her chair, his hands clasped. He was not looking at the aliens. He was looking slightly ahead, as he had in the council chamber. with that same quiet dignity. "We are here," Una began, her voice quiet in the small room, "because of this man. He is why we are not meeting in a war room, discussing terms of surrender. He is why we are meeting here, to discuss terms of a beginning." The Tova representative bowed their head slightly towards the hologram. The Korvax's light dimmed in a gesture of respect. General Park spoke next, his voice like stones grinding. "The conflict, as you knew it, is over. Your fleets remain. Your weapons are intact. Earth's defenses are still primitive. This is not a negotiation from strength. It is a negotiation from necessity. The old system failed. It failed the moment it chose murder over conversation. We will not recreate it." Ambassador Talon's voice chimed softly. "What do you propose, Dr. Lee? Your cognition engine has already redrawn the galactic map. Power no longer flows from weaponry. It flows from solutions. This is a difficult concept to structure. We do not propose a new council," Una said. "We propose a tool. A solutions concord." A schematic appeared above the table. It was a network, a web of light connecting points, a voluntary cooperative, a shared repository for problems. Any member species can submit a crisis medical, environmental, technical, social. The Concord does not dictate answers. It uses shared cognitive resources, including our adaptive logic protocols, to generate possible solutions. The submitting species chooses what to do. The Concord only asks that all solutions be shared, so all may learn. The Korvax delegate pulsed rapidly. A problem-solving collective, not a governing body. Its authority derives entirely from its utility. "Yes," Una said. "Membership has one non-negotiable condition. The June principle." She looked at the hologram of her mentor. "No sentient being, no matter how small their species, no matter how different their thought, may be deemed lesser or irrational by the Concord. And the person of a diplomatic envoy is inviolable. To harm them is to instantly forfeit all access to the Concord and its collective knowledge. It is the only law." The room was silent as they absorbed it. It was so simple. It was not about controlling territory or resources. It was about controlling nothing but a promise of mutual aid. Its punishment was not violence, but isolation from wisdom. "And the Silurians?" Talen asked. "They are free to apply for membership," General Park said bluntly, "when they have a government that agrees to the June principle. The same applies to any species. There are no founding members, no permanent seats, only participants." It was a staggering level of humility from the species that had just broken the galaxy apart without firing a shot. They were not claiming victory. They were offering a library card. The Tova representative spoke, their voice thin but firm. "We will join. We owe your species our lives. But more than that, we wish to learn this way of thinking, to not be victims of problems, but solvers of them." One by one, the others at the table agreed. The Korvax delegate stated, "Logic compels it. The system is efficient. It is adaptive. It is superior to the previous model." The meeting then became practical. They discussed data formats, secure communication channels, how to integrate vastly different technologies. It was a technical briefing, not a triumphal declaration. Una found herself explaining human concepts of brainstorming and lateral thinking to the Korvax, who found the terms delightfully chaotic but mathematically sound. After the formal agreements were recorded, the alien delegates departed, one by one, each offering a gesture of respect to June's hologram before they left. Finally, only Una and Park remained in the quiet room. The general let out a long, slow breath, the tension draining from his shoulders. He looked at the hologram. "It's done. It's not what I ever trained for. No parades. No victory monuments. He would have hated parades, Yuna said, a faint, sad smile touching her lips. She deactivated the hologram. The image of Kim Jun dissolved into golden motes of light that floated for a second before vanishing. Do you think it will hold? Park asked, gazing at the empty space. Yuna looked at the solid wooden table. A human thing. They feared our chaos. So we showed them its purpose. We didn't give them order. We gave them a better kind of chaos. One that builds instead of destroys. It will hold as long as we all remember the cost of the alternative. On Earth, the cognition engine continued to pulse. But its rhythm had changed. The frantic, focused strain of Endgame was gone. Now, its light cycled in a slower, steadier pattern, like a heartbeat. It was listening. It was receiving the first trickle of problems from 100 worlds of strange new stars' radiation, a puzzling mineral decay, a mathematical anomaly in jump space calculations. It began to break them apart, sending pieces out to the human minds best suited to ponder them, while also linking to the nascent networks of the Yulari, the Korvax, the TOVA dot in a small garden in Seoul. Kim Jun's wife, Hannah, tended to her cherry tree. A notification pinged quietly on her tablet. It was a personal message from Yuna. It contained no details of treaties or politics. It simply read, "It is finished. He is at peace. And so are we." She looked up at the clear sky, where the stars were beginning to shine in the twilight. They did not look like threats anymore. They looked like lights left on in the windows of a very large, very strange neighborhood. She touched the bark of the tree, strong and gnarled, and for the first time since the news had come, she felt not the ache of loss, but the quiet warmth of a promise kept. The galaxy had been offered a hand once, and it had been severed. So humanity had offered its mind instead. And the galaxy, slowly, carefully, had decided to reach back.